Om Sahana, Om Sahana Vavatu Sahana Bhunaktu Sahaviryam Karvavahai Tejasvi Navaditamastu Ma Vidveshavahai. Om Shanti Shanti Shanti. May Brahman, the reality, protect us. May Brahman sustain us. May Brahman illumine our thinking process. May we not find fault with each other, with the world, and with the teachings. And may what we study be a source of inspiration to us eternally. Om peace, peace, peace. May peace be unto us, and may peace be unto all. Om Hari Om. Welcome everyone tonight to SRV's Tuesday night satsang and our arati, which we have just finished. We were singing Om Shtapakaya Chatarmasya Sarvadharma Swarupine Avatar Varishtaya Ramakrishna and Om Namah Shri Bhagavate Ramakrishnaya Namo Namaha 3 times. And with that ending, we do our worship this evening to a conclusion. And now we are with you and with our live streaming audience to engage in some satsang. Sat means truth, Sangha means a group of individuals who have gathered together in the name of truth, especially in the spirit of Atma Vichara. Atma, the indivisible true nature within all beings and all things. And Vichara, inquiry into what that signifies, what it means to us, and what it is in essence. So, in line with that, the questions come in from different viewers and from our students and Sangha here in Hawaii, as we're tonight broadcasting from our Honoka ashram on the Big Island of Hawaii, welcoming you all here. And I see that questions have already come in from a number of people, so we can engage in this satsang right away by taking up some of these questions. First question is, there are days when I am slave to my senses. I recognize this, and sometimes I can become the master, but other times I cannot. What is the best course of action during these times? Well, in an ideal world, of course, it would be to sit and meditate and stop all thought process and turn off the senses until such a time when they come back into your obedience. But, of course, we have daily work, we have everyday activities that are going on, and we can't often just stop and drop where we are and turn off the senses, because we need the senses to function in our daily life. So, if you are having this problem with the unruly senses, then you can practice, if you are at home, returning to your meditation seat again and again, and practicing the art of disciplining the senses. We often talk about that as purifying the senses. For instance, we've just engaged in some worship, and that's, according to the Bhagavad Gita, one of the greatest austerities for the body and the senses is to offer everything to God in human form and in the deity that's represented on the shrine. Make an offering of all that into that fire of Brahman, into that fire of yoga. And that's done over and over again, a way of bringing the senses under control. So worship is a natural way of balancing out the mind and senses. Another way of looking at it as far as senses are concerned, we have seeing, tasting, touching, hearing, and smelling. And we can also practice the connection of those with the 5 elements, that is, earth, water, fire, air, and ether. We can connect earth to the sense of smell, and water to the sense of taste, and fire to the sense of sight, and air to the sense of touch, and ether to the sense of hearing or listening. And that's an automatic way of concentrating, and so that the senses all of a sudden come under abeyance when they're coupled up with their components. And so that's a way of becoming one-pointed, making the mind one-pointed. Many great beings, when they have trouble with the senses, just rely on some of these mechanisms. It's a matter for them of an already controlled mind, so if the senses start to wander, it's easy to call them back, as Krishna mentions in the Gita. It's called the process of abhyasa yoga there, where no matter how far the senses wander or how often they wander, then you just simply call them back. And when this is made a habit, then they come under control automatically and you don't have to worry about them. Having controlled senses is a part of dharmic life, spiritual life. You really can't go amongst the teachers and the Sangha and the devotees with an uncontrolled mind and senses. They'll find you out right away and they'll give you away. So these are some of the early components of spiritual practice, is to get the senses under control. We know that the senses lie there externally in the body, but internally the senses lie in the mind. So a lot of what Vedanta teaches has to do with control of the mind. First and foremost, the Mano Yoga, as Sri Sharda Devi, our Ishtam here at SRV Associations, used to say. Mano Yoga, Buddhi Yoga, it's called sometimes in other schools, and in fact that's also brought up by Sri Krishna in the Bhagavad Gita. Mano Yoga, Buddhi Yoga, it's that control of the mind yoga that, once understood and implemented, brings the senses and the body and really all of life and activity into abeyance and easy balance. And then one feels this equanimity all the time. That's called by Sri Krishna sthiti pragnasya. If the devotee should have steady wisdom and equanimity all the time. In Buddhism you'd call it maybe upekshanam or upeksha. This ability to be content with anything, that nothing will ruffle you, at least for very long. You'll be able to call back all of the outward going senses and the movements of the body, the breath too, because that's a movement of the body and it's connected very much inwardly to the mind. This is all practice of yoga, and that is the superlative practice in our tradition. We often say that Vedanta is the great mind, and Tantra is the great heart, and Sankhya is the body of everything, all the 24 cosmic principles of the philosophy. But yoga is that energy of yoga, that is the power to bring everything into control. And that's a practice that is engaged in by the devotees daily, so that it becomes firm and fixed habit. We've created a lot of negative habits in our life, possibly, and they've been added to again and again by repeating them. Sri Ramakrishna used to say, a camel eats thorny bushes again and again. Even if its gums bleed, it goes on eating them. So it's got a bad habit because it just likes the taste of those thorny bushes. So in that way he's saying that people are engaging in eating the thorny bushes of negative habits all the time. Things they probably know are not good for them, not only physically, but mentally and energetically and spiritually too, intellectually, philosophically. All of these things have to be viewed and taken to course and taken to task, that is, and brought under control. If we can do that, then we can sit for a long time without having to fidget in meditation. We can control our breath when some great calamity befalls us or others. And we can control our thoughts when we go into meditation. All of these things are correlatives, really. The actions of the body, the function of the breath, and the movements of the mind are all a kind of action that is usually left in a sort of erratic state. So we want to bring that all under control on all three levels of our mind. Our founder, Lex Hixon, used to have, before he had this radio program called In the Spirit on WBAI radio in New York City through the 70s, 80s, and 90s, was interviewing all sorts of luminaries and various beings in spiritual walks and religious circles. And he used to call his show in the beginning Body, Life, and Mind, or Body, Mind, Spirit. He had several different titles he gave to it over the first couple of years. So he was trying to call attention to the fact that there are these three levels of our being. And this is another triputi, triple teaching, that when we become aware of how many triple teachings there are in the universe, then we're able to focus on specific elements. And that in itself is a kind of samadhi, to be able to focus on certain aspects, because everything gets sort of becomes an amalgam and gets mixed together, and then we're looking at an admixture there that's coming at us in so many different ways, and so our mind gets overwhelmed, or maybe it turns away and turns off to the matter and gives up again and again, and this forms a kind of habit that is not good for the mind, so that when it comes time to meditate, it can't. It simply has developed a habit of they call it sometimes chanchala vritti, a kind of erratic vibration in the mind, which also carries over into the senses and into the actions of the body, nervousness and fidgeting and so forth, and causes one to want to give up and vacate their meditation seat. Maybe they sit for 5 minutes and all of a sudden this erratic vibration comes over them, they just feel like they want to leave. And so they don't do their full hour of meditation, or 2 hours for those of you who are going deeper. So those kinds of things can become habits. They have to be undone. Because they were done by us, they have to be undone by us through yogic practice. And so it's prescribed by the saints and seers, the sages. So those triputis are very important for focus. And there's a question here actually sent in by one of the students about triputis. The question is, triputi and trinity, are they the same thing? Well, it's an interesting question. Yes, in a sense they are. Basically they're not. You can give separate definitions for them. The triputi is that triple teaching, like, say, birth, life, and death. They want you to meditate on that. If they bring out a triputi, like waking, dreaming, and deep sleep, as we've been talking about so much in our live stream classes on Sunday, then it's not just so that we have a convenient way of gathering together groups of threes just for some sort of classification, but basically it's so that we can take everything apart essentially into its essential parts and meditate upon them. The same with taking earth with smell and water with taste. That's so that you can actually have a subject to meditate on. The Sanskrit word for that is called alambana. It's actually a station for meditation. And I mean, if you think about it, it's a very wise way of acting and proceeding, because most people don't know what to meditate on. And that's one of the questions that comes up when you ask them to meditate. Well, what should I meditate on? Because they're used to thinking of something or some future happening, or maybe they're brooding on the past and various things. The mind has all of these various problems that are maybe not even seen as problems. Maybe they're just everyday ordinary mind, and it's just taken over, and now you don't know what a balanced mind is anymore. So if you don't know, then you don't miss it. But when you want to try and get peace of mind, then you find out you can't find it anywhere, and peace of mind evades you, it escapes you. So a triputi is a way of placing the mind immediately on something that's called to attention. And a lambana is a foundation for meditation. So if my teacher tells me birth, life, and death, which is a nice triputi, then I should probably meditate on that. And so now I have something I can meditate on. If I meditate on my birth, then I'm going back in time, as it were, and I'm also going back to a state where when I was younger, and I'm having all this flow of memories go by. And so it's a kind of journey, an inward journey I'm taking. And as long as I'm involved in that inward journey, I'm not brooding, I'm not fearing, I'm not doubting, and I'm not restless. I'm focused. So as long as you keep the focus, that is, that's going to become the main point of it all, is to keep the focus, because we've just talked about equanimity and steady wisdom and ongoing peace of mind. So again, this isn't just a diversion for the mind, it's something that has a foundation, an alambana. So the overall foundation is going to be truth, or God, or Brahman, or whatever you would call it. That's the foundation for everything. But there are sub-foundations or related foundations that help you reach that ultimate substratum. So if I meditate on birth or my life, or I meditate on death, which is actually not a morbid thing at all, as maybe your parents might have told you here in the West, Swami Vivekananda begs to differ. He says meditating on death is a very healthy thing because your true nature is formless and you're right now associating with form only. And what else would meditation be if not to try and reconnect with your formless essence? You might get to the Father through the Son, but you're going to take a form to get to the formless. So, and eventually you'll find out that they're all one homogeneous consciousness, which would be an ultimate realization. And then you're at that ultimate foundation. So meditating on a triputi like that is a very healthy thing. It gives you something to do, but more than just giving you something to do, actually gives you calls the mind back to the point of focus. And there's actually a question here about dharana, concentration, which I'll go to it in that regard. But first, to finish this up, a trinity is, of course, a trio, like a triputi. So Brahma, Vishnu, Shiva would be the trinity in the Hindu pantheon. They're the God of gods. They're the ultimate ishtams. Lord Brahma is in charge of the projection. Sometimes we call it creation, but we have to be a little careful with that word, because creationism is something that is rather foundationless in philosophical terms. You can't get something out of nothing, as the saying goes. So you're not creating anything new. There's nothing new under the sun. That kind of idea comes forth. There's always something that you're pulling from or drawing from that is always in existence. So you're actually just bringing it forth from that. But so that's why we use the word projection. The mind is good at projecting various things. And it should also get very good at withdrawing these things. And in between there's a sustaining period. So there's a triputi for you, projecting, sustaining, and withdrawing, that you can meditate on. And the three great deities that you pray to are Brahma, Vishnu, and Shiva, because they're the masters of projection, sustenance, and dissolution. So right there you have the Trinity as a triputi. That's why I said basically, yes, they are the same thing, but they have different definitions. And you can go to a host of different triputis, like we were saying, the A, U, and M of Om, the three matras. You have to connect them and understand their meaning before you actually say them in a mantra. Then it will fulfill you. The mantra itself is a way of focus, and so there are many different triputis there in which to meditate upon. The in-breath, the held breath, and the out-breath is another triputi which you not only meditate on, but you're doing all the time. So if you look into these triputis, you'll find out that essentially they all are connected to the Trinity, and each one of them is a way of focusing in on the ultimate reality via these great gods or these great deities. Now, as far as concentration is concerned itself, because as I said, that's the underlying foundation for it all, a question came in this way. It said, in meditation these days, I hear Om. Oh, good for you. Let's follow that. If I allow thinking, it goes away. Interesting point. It's delightful just to be with and hear the Om, but is that enough for dharana? Now, for those of you who might be viewing or who will view this in the future, we have to say that dharana is that sixth limb of yoga. And those of you who know authentic Patanjali 8-limbed yoga, you know that it starts with 5 yamas, like ahimsa, nonviolence, and satya, truthfulness, and asteya, non-covetousness. And it also goes to the second limb called niyamas, which have to do with austerity, doing austerities, and worshipping God, and studying the scriptures, swadhyaya. And then it proceeds to a third limb called asana. You should be able to eventually, after you work out the problems in your body, sit in ekasana, one position, and get yourself ready for the samadhi, which is bound to come if you focus. And then the fourth limb is breathing. You have to also control your breath. And for instance, I was just talking about the in-breath, the held breath, and the out-breath. If you watch that, then that's a beginning of a very rudimentary meditation. So if you ask the question of your teacher, what is it should I meditate on? They could give you a triputi, but they could be more specific and say, why don't you just watch your breath? And you hear that a lot in Hindu and Buddhist schools and ashrams and centers and monasteries. Why don't you just watch your breath for a while? And it's got a sort of a double effect going on there. It gives you something to meditate upon, but it also puts you in touch with your witness, your witness consciousness. You may not know it, but the guru is pulling a fast one on you when he says that, because basically he says this is a way to get them thinking about their witness consciousness. It's just to have them concentrate on the breath. Now, most people will not realize that for years, maybe decades, but in the early part, they're concentrating on the breath, and they watching it go in and out, and their instruction is to balance it, make sure that the in-breath is a certain number of counts, and the held breath is a certain number of counts, and the out-breath is a certain number of counts. And then there's another suspended breath, kumbhaka, at the end of that series of 3 breathings. So you've got this in-breath, held breath, out-breath, and another held breath that connects you back to the in-breath. And so they watch this for months or years in their practice until they get the prana under the control. More health, better health comes, as a matter of course. That's not the point, the main point. And then eventually they realize that their heart rate, they can slow their heart rate with their breathing process. That's also not the point, main point. And then eventually they find out that breath and heart rate are connected with the mind's thoughts. And now they can slow the mind's thoughts down. So you say here, if I concentrate on Om, my thinking goes away. So that's really one of the advantages to meditation, is to be free of thought. It's not like Vedanta or any of these Indian darshans want you to be mindless or thoughtless in the usual sense of that term. But yes, in another sense we do. We want you to be able to shut off the mind's thoughts, because there are distracting thoughts, and there are lustful thoughts, and there are angry thoughts, and there are thoughts on brooding, and all sorts of thoughts which you would just as well be without. Isn't it true? So here's one way to do without them, is to actually shut off the switch of the thinking process. And so all of this is leading towards that. Now back to the witness consciousness, and I know I'm sort of pausing in your question here to explain more about the fourth limb of yoga, but it really is key to the dharana, which is coming up number 6. In between dharana and pranayama, which is this fourth limb of yoga, they call it, anga, is the 5th limb, very crucial and very pivotal, and many people fall down in trying to attain it. It's called pratyahara, and it means being able to take the senses off of the objects, basically. They don't mean this just in an outward way, but they also mean it in an inward way. It's usually taught, we must give up the objects, or we must renounce the objects, and that's rather a monastic leaning. But for people who are staying in the world and working in the world, they're going to have to move amongst the objects of the senses without being bound by them. There's another question actually coming up about that, about being bound and by falling out of control of the senses is usually because of the objects that one is attached to, TVs or food or whatever it might be that's plaguing you right now. So that fifth limb of yoga is pratyahara. It's very hard to withdraw the mind, the senses from their objects, but it's even harder to withdraw the subtle senses from the subtle objects, which is why we practice waking, dreaming, and deep sleep meditation, because we come to know that we have subtle senses in our dream state, and we have subtle elements in our dream state too. And so this outer world is not just all there is, there's also an inner world. And then there's a transcendent world too, beyond that. Another triputi for you. Immanent, transcendent, and absolute. 3 worlds, 3 bodies that go with it. 15 senses, 3 senses of senses, 5 each that go with it. 3 senses of 5 elements that go with them. Now we're making connections, now we're getting somewhere. Now we have plenty to meditate on. So don't ask me what to meditate on. See? And it all then comes back to this practice of yoga then, and then you finally do get to the 6th limb of yoga, which you ask about here. Is it enough for dharana just to be with Om? Yes, it really is. Om is the ultimate, but the problem is as you're saying here, these days I hear Om, but when I think it goes away. So, and you say it's delightful to be with the sound of Om. So there are deeper levels of the word that one can contemplate that will take one into deeper levels of yoga. Like dharana itself isn't going to be just enough. That's the 6th limb. So you're going to want to go to the 7th and 8th limb too. So you're going to hear more of Om and go deeper into the word and feel the salutary effects of its sacred vibration when you get into meditation, and then finally when you get into samadhi, you're going to actually merge in Om. So you're probably not going to want to hang out on any periphery there, not be satisfied just with hearing Om and delighting in it or reaching concentration on it, but there's always somewhere deeper and deeper to go. Beautiful story Sri Ramakrishna told was a man gets out of his carriage or his car nowadays, and he's near the beach. He can hear the ocean, but he can't see it. So he hears this distant roar. So that would be, these days I hear the Om, wouldn't it? So he begins walking over sand dunes, and as he walks sand dunes, the sound gets louder and louder. Now he's delighting in this rumbling sound in the distance. He's very attracted, and he wants to see what's making that noise, that wonderful sound. But he has that faith, doesn't he, that something's there because the sound of hearing is there. See, there's another question that has to do with that. So he goes over dune, and finally he breaks over the last sand dune, and there he sees the ocean with a beach and children playing and sailboats and people swimming and waves crashing, and he's absolutely elated, and he runs down and joins everyone in their worship of this great ocean, out of which this sound is emitting, the great ocean of Brahman and its sound of Om. So that's a beautiful story Sri Ramakrishna used to tell, and it very much fits here when you go deeper than just concentration on Om and just delighting in it, but actually find its deepest meaning and merge into it. And that would be the 7th and 8th limbs of yoga. So that's how I would say, how would I explain this question, that not only is it not enough just to delight in Om and hear it once in a while, because personally I remember hearing Om in the crib. I have an experience meditating on birth, life, and death, remember? So I meditated on my birth, and I found out I did have a few memories back in the crib when I was just an infant. And one of those was this powerful sound of Om. that had overtaken me. So one can go beyond just this occasional experiences of Om, and actually, just like you would make the mind your own and balance it completely, you can also make Om your own. There's an Om, sweet Om, we say, right? Or go Omwards. Go Omwards and find out what that Om really is by merging into it. Now, that leads to this question. Ears seem to have two senses, hearing and balance. Is there anything in Vedanta that addresses the balance function? I can't really say I understand the question exactly. You'll have to explain it to me a little deeper, but it seems like you have meditated on the functions of the ears. Again, one of those ways of meditating is taking ear and ether, one of the fifth element, ether, which is undisplaceable and all-pervasive. It's a beautiful thing to meditate on. And cooking it up with the ears, and the power to hear in the ears, and the waves that go out across the ethers that transmit wisdom in satsang, for instance, and which have given rise to these questions. All of that is a very deep connective process that actually will help one achieve balance in life. So to engage in the power of the ears, in their power to hear, and to place them on something that's very profound, will actually inspire you. You'll start to aspire towards living in the ether of wisdom. We talk about these different akashas. Sanskrit word for akasha means a physical akasha with objects, an energy akasha with flows of different energies inside of us, we call prana. And then we talk about an akasha of mind, thoughts. There's a space holding thoughts. Very subtle, no doubt, but can't be denied, can it? And there's also a space holding intelligence, Jnanakasha. And so many of us aspire to live in that Jnanakasha. We want to live in wisdom. Certainly the Jnani is like that. The Vijnani also loves that very much. So basically, the realization of that is that all these objects now are not detriments to him anymore. They're not obstacles anymore. They're not things to get attached to anymore. They're made of intelligence. So the atomic particle now has changed to the Jnanamatra, the particle of intelligence that is at their foundation, at their substratum. So that's all done by meditating on the ears. There's other ways, meditating on the tongue, for instance. That's described in the Raja Yoga, the eight-limbed yoga, meditating on the different parts of the tongue until certain abilities that are there in the subtle sense of taste come out and reveal secrets, and you can meditate on the eyes. So all of that is a way of achieving balance, and so in this question, that's what I would say. Vedanta really keys in on the sense of hearing. That's the list of the elements from gross to subtle is earth, water, fire, air, ether. And the list of the senses from gross to subtle is smelling, tasting, touching, hearing, feeling, touching, feeling, and hearing. See? So hearing is the subtlest sense that goes with hearing the teachings, realizing the truth. It's got a very, very profound function in our tradition. And balance will come from meditating on things like that.
A clarification as to what the questioner was asking has come in.
Okay, we have a clarification. Good.
Okay.
Always good.
Mahesh writes, balance. Ears help us figure out which way is up and which way is down. They sense gravity.
Oh, so then the questioner in this question is talking more about the physical aspect of the ears, balance. Like you can lose your equilibrium easily if you have a cold and you blow through your nose and all of a sudden your ears pop and all of a sudden you have to sit down because your equilibrium's gone. Yes, you probably have to go more towards the Hatha Yoga, more towards the Ayurveda, and more towards the healing sciences to deal with problems or abilities in the ear. Vedanta will concentrate more on the power of the ear to hear, the significance of what you hear, and how deep that can go, rather than just staying with the physical ear. So, balance, no matter how we get it, is important on all levels, let's put it that way. Now, other questions here. This one says, on Sunday, Babaji, you were talking about how time stops when you are in a coma. But doesn't the body experience time, as prana is still flowing and the decay process is occurring? Well, there's a sort of stasis that's also happening there. It's really, you say the body experiences time, but really the experiencer of time is ultimately the mind. So when the mind shuts down in deep sleep, for instance, there is no time. It might as well, centuries could have passed and centuries will still come, but if the mind isn't there connected to the senses and so forth, and yes, the body too, then the flow of time will not be experienced as such. But remember that the philosophy is talking about how to stop the flow of time, because time is essentially illusory. There's a beautiful song I could sing for you, but basically it says, practice meditation and cut time down. It's a song by the Bengali poet Saint Ram Prasad Sen. It says, practice meditation, O mind, and cut time down. So you see that his guru has probably instructed him how to become master of time. Shiva is Trikaladarshi. Tri, three, Kala, time, Darshi, seer. So he's the seer of the three phases of time. Three phases of time would be past, present, and future. So ultimately, the ultimate answer would be that time actually is illusory and doesn't really exist. It's only there when the mind gets consciousness identifies with the mind identifies with senses, and senses identify with objects such as the body, then you have a passage of time. So in a coma, all of that is pretty much erased as far as we know. And definitely we know that it's gone at the time of death and in the time of meditation, the sages call us. So basically you couldn't really say that the body is experiencing time. It's falling under the effects of the flow of time. And the decay process might be going on, but it's been also slowed down quite a bit. So if even a coma can slow down time, then what to speak of how the mind can do it, because the mind was the one who created it. It started time flowing by getting into the body in the first place. So this prana is still flowing. Yes, that's an interesting point. In most of those cases that we know prana ebbs and flows. That's one of the downsides of prana. Is there are many people who, when they find out the wonders of prana, that's it for them. They won't go any further. They're called people who are interested in sensationalism, in the occult, and healing of the body only. They pretty much are, and also psychic phenomena. They're interested in psychic phenomena. They're pretty much caught up in what Sri Ramakrishna Paramahamsa called the tricks of prana. And those things are quite alluring, and they're a whole level of consciousness inside of us, not only physical prana that flows in the body that promotes health or defeats health if it doesn't flow, but also that kind of prana which is called the psychic prana, which is the flow of energy that carries thoughts. Not only thoughts as we ruminate in the brain, but thoughts in the mind too, because mind is a different level than brain. And so it's in the mind that all of this transmigration process is going on. That is what we call birth, life, and death, that triputi we wanted to meditate on. That process of transmigration is actually going on in the mind. And precisely why the worlds are still there when you go into dream, but this world is gone to you. So we know that all of this is going on in consciousness, and that maybe you could say with a small c, lowercase c, because in consciousness with a uppercase c, pure consciousness, there's no movement, no activity, no thought. There's just one homogeneous mass of pure conscious awareness. And it's all bliss, all truth, all existence. All of those capitalized too, uppercase. So the prana, we know that it has this downside to it of flowing and ebbing, ebb and flow of prana. And you only have to go to sleep and sleep on your arm and wake up and it's numb to find out that the prana, physically speaking, has been pinched. And it's just like stepping on a hose so water can't get through. So we know the physical prana has this defect in it of stoppage of flow. In fact, what stops those are called granthis, knots, Sanskrit word granthi, knots in the gross nerves, but then you take it subtler, there are knots in the subtle nerves, the nadis, and there are then knots in the mind, knots in the psyche, knots in the intellect, and these all have to be and can be overcome by getting a hold of the prana. There is one prana that's upward moving, for instance, and it's not responsible, as is traditionally taught, only for the in-breath or for the sneeze. That's only a small part of that upward moving prana. The upward moving prana is also responsible for the aspiration of the thoughts and how they're carried to a higher level, as Sri Ramakrishna said, like a hot air balloon naturally going up. So if you get control of this fifth prana, then it's a prana that always keeps you aspiring, always keeps you inspired, always keeps you interested, and boredom is a thing of the past for you forever when that happens, when that prana gets activated. You'll never be restless or bored again, you'll always be interested. And you'll probably start to be interested in things that are substantial, things that are really beneficial to you and to others, and to the path of enlightenment particularly. So the downside of prana there in the subtle level is that people get attached to it as being reality itself, and they begin to worship the prana. You know, some of my teachings lately have been that prana is the most addictive substance in the world. There is no other addicting substance as entertaining and as alluring and as attaching as prana. Because you might say, oh, there's food and there's drugs and there's alcohol and there's various things that people get attached to and addicted to. But it's the energy in all of those things, plus the energy in the mind that's attracted to them, that is the real addiction. So therefore, if you control, back to our first question, which is a good full circle here, if you control the body, and then you control the senses, and then you control the prana, and then you try and control the mind, then you're going a step at a time outward in, aren't you? But remember, the great beings have come to us with pure minds, and because their mind is pure, then their thoughts are pure, and because their thoughts are pure, then their senses are pure, and because their senses are pure, their body is pure. So they're coming from the inside out. Holy Mother used to say that, Sri Sharda Devi, even about food. From pure food you get pure blood, from pure blood you get pure mind, from pure mind you get pure thought, and from pure thought you get reality, basically. The essential purity, that is Maha Shuddha, the supreme purity, the most pure of the pure, Brahman itself, or reality itself. So, all connected to this idea about prana, which is a very interesting topic to delve into, but also to use that prana like a great Garuda bird, and use it not just to carry nutrients to the organs and breath to the lungs and so forth, but use it to carry the thoughts to God, to higher reality. That would be the supreme use of the prana at a very subtle level, and you would go beyond the psychic prana at that level and into probably what would be called Shakti, who is the purveyor of prana, the overseer of all flow. Mahashakti, the great mother, and the flow of wisdom that is all happening at the behest of this dynamic power we call Shakti. So you may say that then probably the worst part of being in a coma is this lack of consciousness. That is, there's some granti, some has happened in the body-mind mechanism or in the psychophysical being, which is keeping the consciousness from returning to the body for whatever reason. Now, we don't always know why beings go into comas. We definitely know that there's a difference between coma and samadhi, though, and how one goes into a coma-like state or a trance-like state on purpose via their own abilities in meditation. So we should keep that in mind, sort of the ultimate end, and aim and end for the spiritual aspirant. Now I think that pretty much ends our questions. So those 5 have come in from those who were wanting to tune in tonight to our live stream satsang. So I think here we can end. We're having another live stream event on Sunday, our final class in the Advaita Vedanta series. All of you that want to join in at the usual time. It's 2:30 p.m. Hawaii Standard Time, but it goes for 3 hours. Those of you who have been with us in the last 3 or 4 Sundays have seen the evolution of the Jnanamatra teaching, the particle of intelligence. And we will conclude that with next Sunday's class before I move off to our mainland ashrams in Portland, Oregon, and in San Francisco. So please join us next Sunday then for that final class in our present Advaita Vedanta series. So thank you all for joining us, and here we can end with the chant. Om Tachnayo Ma Vrinni Mahe Gatum Yagyaya Gatum Yenu Pataye Daivi Swastarastu Naha Swastir Manushebhyaha Urdvam Jagatu Besajam Sangno Astu Dvipade Sang Chatushpate Om Shanti Shanti Shanti. May we offer all into the Great Self. May we always delight in this offering. May we always revere the Lord and Mother of all sacrifices. May divine blessings be upon us. May peace be into the entire human race. May healing, well-being, and prosperity also then abide among us. Om peace, peace, peace. May peace be unto us. May peace be unto all. Om Hari Om, Hari Om, Hari Om Tat Sat.